All right. Dick, I had no idea who you were talking about, the Dave guy. Never heard of him. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our opening keynote called Emerging Threats in Cyberspace. Ralph Echemendia is a world-renowned instructor, ethical hacker, and security expert who has appeared on KTLA, CNN, Fox News, and the Animal Planet, as well as the pages of USA Today and Forbes magazine, to name a few. We have good people here. He has been involved in the research and development of internationally recognized courseware and certifications, as well as several key security technologies currently powering some of the most powerful e-commerce sites on the internet. He has developed a 2-day applied hacking and social engineering course with Kevin Mitnick and collaborates on many different areas of information security with other well-known industry professionals. Echemendia is described as a security samurai whose experience began at the age of 14 with ham radio, phone phreaking, and the old bulletin board systems. His interest in technology eventually led to jobs in the computer industry. For over 16 years, he has conducted security audits and penetration tests and consulted for numerous organizations around the world, including the UN, Oracle, and various hospitals and financial institutions. And I believe our fighter is coming through the door right now. Music.
When I checked in here, they told me I could wear my robe wherever I wanted to. So I'm wearing my robe from now on. And I got a walking stick too, so I'm all set. I love this place. All right, so let's see. I have a clicker here. Let me see, make sure it works. Yeah, look at that, it works. All right, so you've heard enough about me. I think I'm gonna come down there. Let's see, can I get this microphone? I don't think I can. All right. So I'll hang out over here since I can't see it over there. All right, so, all right, awesome. Mic check. All right. If you're wondering what's under here, don't wonder too much. All right. So, basically, what I'm going to go through here is a history of cyber threats and kind of give you a little historical background as to the way I and we in the security business see how reactive security really is. We'll talk about 2008 at a glance because most of our reports are usually 2 to 3 years behind when it comes to statistics and such. So that's what we're still talking about, 2008. Online threats, we'll talk a lot about the online threat itself. We'll talk about state-sponsored threats and arrests. We'll also discuss cloud computing. Kind of going back here for a second, I actually work for Terramark Worldwide, which some of you may know. And as some of you know, solution run at Terramark for the federal space, as well as many other solutions in the commercial space. Frames, for example, tax season for certain companies, and they can go from 4 servers to 400 servers very quickly. So with us being one of the major cloud computing providers, and especially to the federal government, one of the biggest issues with cloud computing is security. That's always the big question. So that's what I do over there. My specialty is in virtualization and security. So we'll talk about the cloud, and click. All right, so here's my little history of cyber threats, okay? And if you look at the very top part of this right here, it's actually a timeline of network security, okay? And the very bottom part of this is web application security. So they're 2 different things because those are 2 very different types of security threats that we've had to deal with. And the top one there, you can see back in 1988 was the very first security event to take place that anyone really knows about, which is called the Morris worm. And most of you probably have heard of the Morris worm at some point, right? Took down most of ARPANET in hours, if even that. All right, so look how long it took before we actually had the first commercial network firewall. It was 1992. And that was the first real product that had anything to do with addressing some of the security issues, right? A little later after that, in 1994, 95, we had the first security scanners, which we now know as vulnerability scanners, right? It was Satan in the open source community, and then ISS scanner, which became the first commercial scanner, right? Now, right after that, you'll notice that that prompted patching issues, right? Was what came up from that. Was we had a lot of issues with not being up to the certain version and a lot of vulnerabilities being there. That's what these kind of tools showed us all. So there was an attempt to address this by something called patch link, which was to patch whatever pieces of software potentially were vulnerable based on these scanners, right? Around the same time frame in 1996, we saw the beginning of target mass hacking. Targeted mass hacking, not just mass hacking, but targeted mass hacking. They were going after specific companies, specific institutions, specific resources, such as the US Army was a good example of what happened around that time. It was 1997 when Linux released its IP chains, okay, which is its firewalling mechanism. Windows Update in 1998 came out, and around the same time, now here's the whole thing with this, is what I want you to realize is that it took some event to take place for the adoption of a certain technology and security to be normal or something that everyone is doing. And consultants or penetration testing really became a normal thing after 1998. Before 1998, it was pretty rare to be doing pen tests, as we call it, or ethical hacks. Now we tend to call them audits, depending on what we're dealing with, right? Nessus came out around the same time frame. I'm sure some of you have heard of Nessus, right? And like I said, Windows Update. Code Red and Code Red 2 reared its ugly head in 2001, and shortly thereafter, Microsoft announced its Trustworthy Computing memo, which, as we all know, pretty much meant nothing shortly thereafter. Then Slammer, okay, and Blaster took place, and because of Slammer and Blaster and the fact that these issues or these specific events even bypassed firewalls and went through VPNs and all that, it became normal to do in-house network vulnerability assessments, to run Nessus and to run Retina or whatever tools you may be using internally within the organization to find out what may be going on. So due to Slammer and all that, we had the adoption of in-house vulnerability scanning. Then, finally, Windows released, by default, a firewall in XP. Prior to that, no versions of Windows had any firewalling capabilities. Whatever services and ports were open, that's the services and ports that were open. There was no way to write any rules, per se, for that. So now we're at 2004 before Windows XP implemented default firewalls into their product. All right, now we're post 2007, but in 2006, 2007, it became software as a service, as we now start hearing software, platform, and infrastructure as a service. Broad adoption of software as a service vulnerability scanning, best known as Qualys. There might be a couple of other players out there, but they're pretty much the ones that made this software as a service vulnerability scanning a pretty normal thing now. And everybody uses Qualys in one way or another, right, for doing that sort of thing. But that's completely adopted now, as well as in-house vulnerability scanning. And shortly thereafter, in 2007, PCI Standards Council was formed, and now we have PCI compliance when it comes to, for the purpose of transactional issues, right? Now, if you look at the very bottom, that was a network security timeline. Great. But most attackers today don't really attack the network anymore. The target is your applications, and the target is the data. So let's move on to applications.